I basically had tried everything that I knew based upon how I was disciplined as a child, and none of that seemed to work. So I figured maybe I need to step it up a notch and made the mistake of deciding to spank him with a belt. Serious mistake. They proceeded to charge me with child abuse.
We need to phase that entirely out of our thinking that it's okay to hit children.
Here's the big deal. All of these things mean more about the parents than they do about the child.
Is it okay to spank your child or use a belt? Is it discipline or child abuse? And what's the right way to discipline a child? Today we hear from a woman who had a criminal case brought against her for whipping her son with a belt. And later in the show, two parenting experts who help you deal with problem children. Dr. Jayne Major, author of Breakthrough Parenting, and Dr. David Swanson, author of Help, My Kid is Driving Me Crazy. Up first, Francine Jackson, who faced criminal charges for belting her son. Pleasure to have you here today, Francine.
Thank you.
Well, I interviewed actor Tom Arnold recently, and he told me that when he was growing up, he used to get spanked by one of his teachers in school. These days, you get arrested for that kind of thing. It is a different time. What happened in your case? Why did you belt your son?
Well, I was having continual behavioral problems with him in school. Some of the things that he was doing was spitting on other children, he was cursing, he was fighting, and technically, I had tried everything that I knew based upon how I was disciplined as a child, which included timeouts, writing things more than once, and open hand spankings. Well, none of that seemed to be working. It seemed like his behavioral problems kept getting worse.
So what was he doing?
For example, when he got to school, basically within his class, they had a color scheme according to your behavior.
Wow.
So red would be bad and blue and green would be good. Well, he would start the day off on red. So that entailed him running around the classroom, not listening, interrupting the teacher continuously, just out of control. So by the end of the day, he pretty much mellowed out, and then he would calm down and expect to be on blue or green. And that was an ongoing problem. He just had such an issue with listening and paying attention and not disturbing his class.
And did he bite a child at a certain point?
Yes, he did bite a child. He bit her pretty bad, I believe, on her hand, if I'm not mistaken. He was calling little girls the B word. I mean, it was to the point where he did get kicked out of school in kindergarten.
In kindergarten?
In kindergarten. He was asked not to return to his school because of continual behavioral problems. So it was pretty severe.
So what do you do as a parent when your kid gets kicked out of school in kindergarten?
Well, interesting enough, I didn't find out about this until 3 days prior to school starting. Let me just give you a little history about what has happened. I've been going through a pretty bitter divorce and custody battle, and I think that contributed a lot to the instability and anxiety of our son. So what had happened was I had, because of the continual behavioral problems, and I was just basically at my wit's end, I made the mistake of deciding to spank our son with a belt.
So you tried other things first.
I tried other things and it didn't work, and I didn't feel like I had the support of his father in disciplining him.
And going through a bad divorce.
Correct. So there was a lot of things that I think contributed to our son's behavior. But like I explained, I basically had tried everything that I knew based upon how I was disciplined as a child, and none of that seemed to work. So I figured maybe I need to step it up a notch, and made the mistake of deciding to spank him with a belt. Serious mistake.
So what happened?
Basically what happened is his father got CPS involved, or DCFS, and
It's Child Protective Services.
it's Department of Children and Family Services, and they proceeded to charge me with child abuse. Both of my children were removed from my home, and this all occurred in April. And since April, I've been fighting a criminal case. Luckily, the charge had been dismissed, but I had to complete a series of parenting classes. And as far as the children's court case, they understand the problem with people realizing that things that or ways that they were disciplined in the past, you cannot discipline like that today.
Were you spanked or?
I was spanked, yes. I was spanked with a hand. I was spanked with a switch, which is a branch from a tree. I was no time out. I was put on punishment. Pretty much an assortment of different things. Within the African American community particularly, spanking and whippings with belts and switches, that's something that's very common.
Well, we were talking before the show about whether there's kind of a different philosophy among maybe different ethnic or racial groups
Correct.
about, and we were kind of in a way joking, we were looking at a comedian's tape about, like the white parents were, afraid to hit their kids, but the black or the Indian parent, I guess, just smack them upside the head if they needed it.
Right, and I was smacked a couple of times, and I think culturally that's just how African Americans, not all, but based upon what I've experienced and people that I've talked to, including my aunt who raised me and my uncle and other family members and friends, it's very common for parents to resort to spanking or whipping with belts and switches.
Now, with everything that you've gone through and are going through, would you do something differently, or, should parents spank or belt their kids or not? And is the system taking it too far, or did you make a mistake, or what's...
I feel that in my case as a single parent, I tried to use discipline as a means to get respect from my children, which was completely wrong. I've learned that you don't have to use punishment in order for your children to actually behave and do what you expect them to do. Since this whole incident, I've been attending a breakthrough parenting class, and
Was
now
that with Dr. Major?
correct, excellent class, and now I'm understanding that all it takes is communication and the child to understand exactly what your expectations of them are and where exactly they went wrong in understanding what you're, I guess, wanting them to do.
So you're trying that with your son now?
I'm trying it, and it's working.
It does work.
It was frustrating at times because when he was upset about something, for example, I went to the grocery store and he wanted a magazine, and he had picked up the magazine after I purchased everything, and I explained to him no, that he could not have the magazine because he did not ask for it. Well, when we got to the car, he was completely irate, out of control. I put him in the car, explained to him the reason why I did not purchase the magazine. That still wasn't good enough. He kicked my chair, he hit his sister, completely out of control. At that particular time, I said, when you get to the house, you go to your room and you have time out. Well, in the class, Dr. Major has explained that the consequence has to fit the behavior. So me sending him to his room wasn't the best consequence for how he acted.
What should you have done?
Basically, what I should have done is, at that particular time, instead of rushing to get the kids in the car, I probably should have taken the time out to sit there and explain to him and have a conversation with him so that he understood where I was coming from and that he knew I understood where he was coming from. That way we could have been on the same page.
And how do you get along now after this has happened? I don't know how you feel about the fact that you were spanked. If you hold it against your parents for the way they disciplined you, but does he hold it against you, or does he just think mom's doing what mom's supposed to do, or?
Well, basically, my whole interpretation of this event, I have reflected on how I was disciplined as a child, and basically parents only do what they know. And that was the case with myself. I only did what I knew how to do. The fact that I'm trying more breakthrough parenting methods, I think, is really helping my communication with my son and our relationship, because now it's not like Mommy's just getting so upset with me. Mommy's really trying to understand where I'm coming from.
He knows that you're trying to work with him.
So all of the yelling and me getting frustrated, all of that has ceased. Now I get down on his level and I try to communicate with him and make sure that he knows that I understand where he's coming from, and I think that gives him a sense of comfort.
Well, thank you very much, Francine Jackson, and good luck with your situation.
All right.
We'll be right back. And we are back. Joining me now is Dr. Jayne Major, author of Breakthrough Parenting and founder of Breakthrough Parenting Services. Pleasure to have you back again, Dr. Major, one more time. Is it okay to spank your kids?
No.
So what do you do?
We need to phase that entirely out of our thinking that it's okay to hit children. We live in a time where it's illegal for men to hit women and women to hit men, and they could go to jail. but it's still legal for adults to hit children.
So it is legal, but she got into Francine and last
Yes,
thing I got
because
into
she
trouble.
raised welts and bruises, and it was too excessive.
Too excessive.
But it doesn't make any sense to hit children when there are so many superior ways of disciplining them. You don't even have to resort to punishment.
So nothing physical, no spanking,
No
no
corporal
belts,
punishment
no.
is not necessary.
Okay.
The
So-
point is, you don't want your children to be afraid of you, do you? Does that make sense, to have children be afraid of you?
So how do you maintain discipline without some kind of control over the kids? If you can't beat them, what do you do?
Well, don't beat them. There are many techniques. One of the things that Francine learned was effective communication skills, where she and her son could now communicate in a way that they were understanding each other. Another one is a win-win problem-solving style that I teach in the classes, where the one person doesn't feel like they've lost. It's a win-win kind of thing. And focusing
Meaning?
not a win-win where you're satisfied with the agreement that you've made, and I'm satisfied with the agreement that you've made, and we're both motivated to do something about it. If you're,
Now, she seemed to say that her kid seems to be responding, that he's following through, maybe not all the time, at least
Right.
sometimes there is a response. So it actually works. I mean, kids, if you talk to them, they're not just going to
absolutely.
say what you want to hear and then still keep
I
on
really
doing it.
believe after 26 years of teaching parenting classes, 50 weeks a year, I believe that children want to get along with us. And the reason that they don't is because we don't know how to get along with them. If we did, then they would be more cooperative than we could imagine. The title of my book is Breakthrough Parenting, Moving Your Family from Struggle to Cooperation. If parents learn those techniques, and you have to let go of the old, punitive, mean-spirited kind of things that we all pretty much grew up with. And
Without
learn
getting too
modern
personal, but
methods.
since you mentioned it, were you spanked as a kid?
One time I was whipped really badly. It was bad. Fortunately, I didn't have that as that was just a one-time incident.
And so there are different styles of parenting, even in this day and age, although I think in general society is less tolerant, as you said, in many ways, whether it's men and women or parents and kids, of anything physical. But there are what you call, I think, permissive parents, and then, the idea that kids are just little angels who just want to
Yes.
do good unto the world and just let them have their way. And
Yes.
Does that work?
That's a disaster.
So
It's a disaster because the children feel entitled, and they don't learn the social skills of give and take. They're little takers, and they grew up to be really obnoxious with other people.
So you don't have a
No.
completely rosy picture of
No,
little kids. that
no,
they're just-
it's really a mistake. Children need to know what the appropriate boundaries and discipline and predictability in their family, and they need to cooperate with what's happening. It's
Okay.
not just about them.
Well, she mentioned, I think, the magazine was something that her son was acting up on even now. Or if you want to give us another example, let's take a specific situation of how you deal with a problem child. I mean, the generalities aside, what do? If your kid's always raising a tantrum or throws a fit because you won't let him buy the magazine or...
Well, basically, you want to get to what is the private logic of the child. The child has some logic behind why they're acting the way they're acting. And that requires a skill of receptive listening.
I want it because everybody else has it.
Fine, then you work with whatever that logic is. And I would have said to her, you could have the magazine, but you can't have it now because we've just checked out. Well, next time we come to the store, if you want that magazine, we'll get it. So I wouldn't have just cut him off like, no, you can't have it.
So
There wasn't anything wrong with him wanting the magazine. That apparently what was wrong was the timing of it. And he's still very upset to go into the car and carry on the way that he was carrying on like that. He really needs a lot of psychological help. She said she's been through a very bitter divorce. And
for such a young child.
yeah, and the father and she are not able to get on the same page. There's a lot of sabotaging, and the child is feeling it.
So even in the best of parenting situations, it can be difficult, but then when you have a divorce,
Yes, when there's that level of hostility, yes, and the children bear the brunt of that.
and little kids respond to their behavior and learn from things as Dr. Swanson had said in his book, they can be manipulative and see
Right.
or know how to push the buttons. How do you deal with that sort of thing?
It's kind of a funny thing when parents say that their children are manipulative. Can you imagine how manipulative parents are with children? Isn't that the name of the game?
So we got a little war going
yes.
on here, a struggle between
The idea is, instead of manipulating and creating drama that you have to now put out all kinds of fires, let's solve the problem. That's what
So
I
again,
teach.
you want them to talk, I guess. It's more
Well, you
of a-
certainly talk, but understand what the nature of the problem is. I teach that there's two ways of looking at a problem. One is with logic and solving a problem logically, and another way is with drama and exploding it out into all kinds of upset. That's not the way to go.
Now, the opposite of permissive parenting, we call the authoritarian parenting, which could be what's opposite of the corporal side, but even that aside, it could just be like, no means no, or that sort of thing. What do you think of, no means no, or because I said so, or
Well, no means no.
because I'm the parent, you're the kid,
It depends
or
on the context, of course, of the situation. And certainly no means no. And there's a reason for no meaning no, and explain that reason. The child can hear it, or if they're too sick, or they're too young, or they're too upset. No means no. But if you can explain...
So you don't always have to engage
No.
the kids in some kind of conversation.
You are still in
or
charge.
negotiation or-
You are in charge. You're not handing that. This is not breakthrough parenting. Is not permissive parenting, and it isn't authoritarian parenting. And authoritarian parenting is where the child's emotions and feelings and wants and needs can be very easily disregarded, and I don't think that's a good way to go.
Any final advice for children? Parents, I'm sorry, with problem children. Maybe you should give advice to the children too. I don't know. But
I think that if parents realized how much they are investing, how much of their resources, how much time, money, effort, and energy in raising a child, and the outcome, how much joy and misery could be the result of it, they ought to run, not walk, to a parent education class and learn the most important job that they'll ever have in their life, how to be a wonderful parent.
thank you very much once again, Dr. Jayne Major. We'll be right back with Dr. David Swanson. And we are back with Dr. David Swanson. His book is Help, My Kid is Driving Me Crazy. Great to have you here
Thank
today,
you.
Dr. Swanson.
Thank you, Greg.
Is it okay to spank your kids?
No. No, it's not.
So what do I do if I have kids? What do you do with those problem kids if they're acting up?
Well, let's talk about spanking first of all, because there's a big problem with spanking. We as parents, we tend to get really upset and engage in spanking or yelling and these types of things for three basic reasons. One is because our feelings get hurt. Two is because we're exhausted and overwhelmed. And three, because we feel ineffective. And I think what you heard earlier was that this was a parent who really felt ineffective and felt that in the moment she got so caught up that she had no other alternative but to spank. And unfortunately, we get there.
I was talking to the makeup artist before the show, and we were talking about this, and I said, I think that parents resort to physical punishment when they lost control.
Yeah.
That's the thing, you feel ineffective.
Yeah, and there are. Dr. Major is absolutely right. There are so many different ways that you can use to discipline your child. But one of the big things is to figure out more about your child, what he finds to be of interest to him, whether it's video games or bedtimes. For example, a child who really wants to have control in the house, bedtime's a huge thing to start playing around with. In addition to that, kids are very big on pleasing. So to think that the only thing you have at your disposal is giving a punishment or a consequence, to go ahead and reward them. Kids operate from what I call an I win mentality. I want it now. It's very hard for them to wait, right? So if we can figure out what it is that they want, they're very oftentimes willing to work for that in addition to praise.
Well, Dr. Major talked about permissive parenting and more authoritarian kind of parenting. How would you describe your philosophy on this? Are you more toward the...
For me, being a parent, you got to realize I'm a father with 3 boys. I love my 3 boys. And lucky enough, everything seems to be in order, but for me, it's very concrete parenting. It's, realizing where the limits and boundaries are and never wavering from those things. You realize your child will get up every single day and go to school, and not once will he say, instead of going to school today, why don't we go to Disneyland? Sounds like it's Wednesday, sounds like a good day to do it. They never do that because they go through the motions. And so those things that we set in place and they can count on every single day tend to reduce a lot of that power struggle. You don't get
Some kind of structure or a set routine.
Gotta have the structure. Yeah, and you can't waver. Bedtime's 8:30, it's 8:30. If dinner time happens at 6, it's 6 o'clock. Those are the little things you can do to prevent a lot of those behavioral problems in the future.
And consistency and discipline, I guess you talk about, because you know, if they see something works one time, then they think it may work another.
Completely. My book is called Help, My Kid is Driving Me Crazy, and it has to do with the 17 ways kids manipulate and what parents can do about it. Here's the big deal. All of these things mean more about the parents than they do about the child. So for example, if you're a child who's overwhelmed and exhausted, I'm going to steamroll you. I'm going to keep asking for what I want until I get it, because I know you're tired and eventually you're going to break down. If you work a lot and you're away, and I know you feel guilty about that, then I'm going to use play the victim, or I'm going to use emotional blackmail to make you feel guilty.
Well, what I liked about your book was you were very realistic, I thought, in the sense that, again, like Dr. Major, you don't have a rosy kind of picture of children. You say that they lie and they manipulate.
They do, but then again, we all do. We all do. And it's our job, really, to kind of, put together these 3 innate desires that we have, but kind of keep them in order. Look, as a parent, your job is to make sure your kids are safe. You got to look out for their better interest in the future. And last is to see them happy. And a lot of times we struggle with that. If you could put safety first, better interest second, and worry about the happiness last. I know that sounds like a horrible thing to say, but kids are driven. Remember the I win mentality. They're driven to find happiness. They'll find that.
Even sometimes you have to do with, they may not like it, but it's in their best interest.
Right. And by the way, you want to keep your poise when you're doing this. I agree that there really shouldn't be a lot of tension in this relationship between parent and child. But if there is, it's not your child's fault. It's your fault as a parent. You really need to look at this and see what you can kind of revamp, and so that you get things basically back to steady flow. Put those 3 innate desires in place. Make sure that you have a consistent kind of ritual and structure at home, and make sure that you spend time loving and getting out and having a good time, throwing the ball or going swimming or jumping on the trampoline or fishing, whatever it might be.
How old are your sons?
9, 8, and 6.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
You got your hands full.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not an easy thing, because kids know what they want and they'll go after that. But I got to tell you, I balance this equation: kick over cuddle. As much time as I spend setting up the limits and boundaries, you better believe that we spend that much time having our Nerf gun fights at home, tickling and wrestling and all of that stuff. If you don't have that, you're going to lose your kids' respect. If they see you as just being this disciplinary figure who's always on them, that's not a good thing.
Well, I like the fact that, again, you talk about the 17 ways that kids can, manipulate their parents or steamroll them and various other aspects, but you also have solutions to it. You're not just putting a problem, you have a way of dealing with it. Maybe we could talk about some specific ways. For instance, out of the blue, Francine mentioned the magazine scenario. That's actually an example you have in your book.
Surprise attack. That's right. Surprise
so
attack.
The kid wants the magazine.
Yeah.
And now in your book, the parent hasn't put it back, but
Yeah.
I think she bought it the kid threw a tantrum over the magazine. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things here. One is that kids definitely will manipulate in the moment. And I wanted to create a book that within 3 minutes you could pick it up, find out what your child's doing, turn to that chapter, and get the answers that you need. The other thing you need to know here is that kids don't just stop with one. If the first one doesn't work, they will very quickly shift to the second. So a child who uses surprise attack, and this is, you said no and no, it's a little different. So in this case, though, surprise attack, the child has asked you repeatedly throughout that shopping spree to get a magazine, and you said no, but at the last minute they throw it on the counter, and again it goes through. What they're hoping is either 1, it gets through, or 2, you'll be too embarrassed to say, no, you can't get that. So the book describes kind of an intervention there. But if it doesn't work for them, what Francine talked about was a child who then wanted to punish, kicking the back of a chair, hitting his sister, and things like that. So then we get punishment going. And then maybe you get the pouting or the, playing the victim kind of a thing. You get, and the interventions are different for all of those. But certainly sticking to your guns, meaning what you say and saying what you mean. If there's, what I really love to do with steamrolling or punishment or things like that, is using what I call the watch method. So this is, I'm going to ask you to stop. And if you're not going to stop, I'm going to say, okay, I get it. And as long as it's safe, I'm going to look at my watch, and for every minute that you continue, it'll be 3 minutes of early bed or 3 minutes away from
and video game time. And I can just see him standing there doing that, too.
Well, and I'm going to look at it. Hey, listen, all of these things work is if I could push your emotional buttons as a parent. So if I can punish you and I see you getting riled up, it works for me. So by
You know,
simply
that
looking at
worked
my
for
mom-
me too. I was ready to like okay, what do I got to do?
That's right. Yeah, well, if I can do this, your punishment or your steamrolling stops working for you, and what it does is it starts kind of adding to your anxiety, because you know the more you start to continue, so long as I disengage and ignore what you're doing, it's going to start working against you. It starts working for me.
Now, what if your kid is biting other kids at school? Something more serious like that.
See, I think in this case, one of the things that we didn't talk about is we really need to evaluate and assess the situation. A kid who's running around the classroom who has a tough time sitting still, a kid who's acting out, biting other kids, hitting other kids, the first thing I'm thinking about is this is a child who's in distress. I'm not going to look at this as simply a behavioral issue. I need to figure out what's going on. She was in the middle of a high conflict divorce. The first thing you see are behavioral problems. You see grades drop. You see all of these things start to happen, and it's very easy to point at the child. This was a kid whose mom and dad, his whole world was being ripped apart, and what's he to do with that? If you got two parents who are bitterly entrenched in this battle, there's not a whole lot of room for that kid to have his emotions hurt. So I think that's where you got the acting out.
Well, I'm sorry, we're almost out of time, but are there any final words of advice for parents with those problem children?
Yeah, I'd say keep your
For any
poise.
children.
Keep your poise and keep your consistency. But the one thing I would want people to know about is think about this, that when it comes to raising your kids, time takes no prisoners. What you did yesterday will always be there. Enjoy the time you've got. Invest that time. Be the best parent you could be and work hard at it. You've got so much time with those kids and it goes by so fast.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Swanson. The book is Help, My Kid is Driving Me Crazy. I'd also like to thank Francine Jackson and Dr. Jayne Major. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.